What's the root under problems such as sex trafficking, abortion, sex addiction, all those kinds of really, well, hard and painful things? I'm Dr. Carol. Thank you for joining me on this episode. That root, it's a big deal. If we don't address the root, then all we do is we keep chopping off the hydra heads. From my old biology days, I remember a hydra, the heads keep growing up everywhere. You've got to get at the root. My guest on the program today talks about that. Lisa Rowe is a licensed social worker, a transformational life therapist. She is also executive director of Support After Abortion. In this conversation, we talk about the root, and what was so impressive to me as I got to know Lisa is her understanding that the problem doesn't begin the moment a woman shows up in the abortion clinic, or the moment a pimp asks a young woman to come with him and she has her first sex trafficking experience. There's deeper roots there. And as Lisa says, we are more alike than we are different in those roots. I want Lisa to explain her story and her experience, but I know you will appreciate that. Here's Lisa Rowe. Lisa Rowe, what a delight to have you on the program today. I've been looking forward to this conversation. You have just such a wealth and frankly, some breadth of experience. Just thanks for being here.
I am so thrilled to have connected with you at SILS, and I'm thrilled to be with you. I can't wait for the conversation that God has for us.
Exactly. Well, we're going to get into some kind of hot button topics today. And for those who are listening, just know that. If you get triggered and need to listen later, that's fine, but we're going there. Lisa, I love to highlight stories, and I just like to start with you kind of giving a picture of the elements of your experience that God has kind of weaved together to get you to where you are now. How did you come to this?
Yeah, I love that you just said that, get to where I am now, because there were times in my life where I thought I was just going to get to the next day. And now I'm able to see, Dr. Carol, that, there was such a purpose in all those painful experiences. And so to kind of just summarize, I was a child of an alcoholic and a codependent. And so what was mirrored to me growing up was a lot of insecurity, a lot of numbing, a lot of emotional unavailability. What that looked like for me as a child is I went seeking that attention, that love, those experiences outside of my family of origin. My parents weren't able to do that. They were doing the best that they could, but it wasn't what I needed as a young girl. Of course, now this is 4 decades later, I'm able to share this with you. I didn't know what I was doing then. By 8th grade, I had tried every drug there was, numbing and trying to explore what was missing in my life. And my favorite drug was men. And so at a very early age, I became sexually active and found a lot of my validation, my affirmation, my security in attention from men. And that went on. I did not have a boyfriend or a partner for the majority of my teenage years, my 20s. And it landed me in a very dysfunctional marriage where I ended up finding myself divorced and exploring what sex addiction meant. I had no idea. This is where I learned that I was living in an alcoholic home growing up, and that I was seeking this attention and validation from men that couldn't give it to me truly. And where it really came from was inside of me. And so God has used that personal experience to propel me in my professional career and to bring about healing that I never knew I needed. And so it's a real privilege to be able to talk about the things we're going to talk about, because they come from a personal place inside of me, but they also have been a professional exploration as well.
Yeah, on that personal side, you've illustrated just in a couple moments that God takes all the stuff that we experience and builds it into us for a purpose. But specifically what you mentioned about sex and love addiction and looking for something that your heart needs, and then your first marriage was with somebody who was the same. Can you talk just for a second about that heart need? You referenced it, but just unpack that for a second. What were you looking for?
Yeah, and I say this and I use the words now, but I think it's really important as your listeners are tuning in. I didn't know what this was. I just knew that on a Saturday, I didn't want to be alone. I knew that on a Monday night, if somebody asked me where to go, where I wanted to go for dinner, it was wherever they wanted to go.
Yeah.
I didn't have a sense of who I was. I didn't have a sense of who I wanted to be. I knew that people provided me with a better sense of who I was than I did. And so being alone was uncomfortable. It was actually very, I couldn't sit still at parties. There was nothing in me that felt connected to myself. I was very disconnected. I would abandon myself at all costs, do things that I didn't want to do, but I didn't know that I didn't want to do because it was so blurry for me. And so, what the words that we use in this space is insecure. I didn't have love for myself. I didn't even know what self-esteem was. But for all intents and purposes, on the outside looking in, you would have thought I had it all together because I at least knew how to do that. I at least knew that you had to put on a show to show that you were a part of this society. And so I could do that really well, but inside I was a hot mess.
Wow. Um, just to get into some of your professional experience, you now have been working with people and perhaps especially women who are in a mess. And you've done that in a couple different contexts. So tell us a little bit about that.
Sure. So interestingly enough, as I was walking through my first divorce, I had found myself working as the teen parent program director in our local high school. We were able to invite parents to stay connected to their education while having their children on campus. And so I ran that program. Again, on the outside, it looked perfect. I was helping all of these vulnerable girls and their children. And inside of me, I was learning that if I'm going to struggle to get up at 4 o'clock in the morning to get to work, and they're doing the same thing, get your tail to work. And so there was this beautiful personal intertwining of their journeys and mine. And then God would take me to work with sex trafficking survivors. And that was an interesting journey too, because what I learned in that experience is, although I have not been trafficked, I can relate to a lot of those insecurities, a lot of the codependency that exists in that space. And I found myself across from the first survivor going, I am more like this woman than I am different in all the ways that I could hear her talking about the way she saw her pimp and the way she experienced the attention that he gave her. I could see that mirrored back to me in my own relationship at the time. And then from there, I moved into the pregnancy center, which I felt like was boot camp for the work that we're doing now at Support After Abortion. It taught me a lot about the political nature of abortion, which I had no idea about, the political nature that we have 50 years ago to now, and how we don't see humans when we talk about this topic. We see the political or religious perspectives. And so inviting my work into the abortion space, it has been a really interesting journey, helping people understand how important it is that we do see the human first as we talk about abortion and how it's intertwined with all the other dysfunction that we experience.
Wow. Wow. That political part, let's just take 2 minutes and kind of highlight that and then move to the human, because I think so many, at least of the kind of audience that normally I connect with, is going to see it as political / religious, that there's a right, and we have to put in the policies. It's not that policies aren't important, but just talk about a little more about how that can miss really the heart of the matter.
Yeah. And I love that you just said that, because a deacon, a faith leader that I came across a couple years ago said, Lisa, laws don't change hearts, hearts change laws. And
Mhm.
that's been the premise of a lot of my conversations, because what I learned, because as I was asking God, like, what do I know about abortion? Why are you calling me to this space? Right. What he showed me was that all of the women I had served up until that point, and men, frankly, um, although their symptoms looked a lot different, their roots were the same. So the woman I served in the teen parent program, the father I served there, the sex trafficking space, the pregnancy center space, although we were looking at unexpected pregnancy and sexual exploitation and sexual abuse and trafficking, and we were looking at addiction and all of these codependency, what I found was that women and men who experience abortion have very similar roots, right? This is one of the behaviors that is an outcome of those vulnerabilities. Unfortunately, our culture has created this space where abortion is a political issue and a religious issue. And so we forget that it is also a human issue. But we've noticed in the homelessness population, in the divorce population, in domestic violence, that there needs to be the policy that you've talked about, but we've identified that there's human beings behind those experiences as well. So we have programs, we have safe homes, we have these things for folks experiencing these issues, yet we haven't gotten there with abortion yet.
Mm.
Mhm.
That is a really, I think, important point. And can you talk a little bit more about how you see what that root is? Whether it is domestic violence or human trafficking or teen pregnancy or abortion. What is the root?
Absolutely. So oftentimes we see that correlation of that early traumatic experience, the lack of a real genuine relationship with a primary caregiver, that attachment to somebody who you know loves and cares for you. And just like in my life, I went looking for that love and attention from others. There's many other people doing the very same thing. And when in our culture, sex is objectified in the way that we connect with people, we find teenagers finding themselves looking for that connection and entering into vulnerable sexual relationships where the outcome could be pregnancy, right? And when lacking all of the ability to make decisions without feeling the pressure, without feeling that fog, we make decisions that we don't think about the consequences long term. No different than, using drugs, right? We don't think it's just a party on a Friday night. We have no clarity at that time, especially if we're using it to fit in or numb the pain of our circumstances. We don't realize there's an addiction on the other side of that, or there could be. And so very similarly, we experience this in the abortion world.
Mm. I am so glad you said that, because as important as the discussion is about what happens after the positive pregnancy test, you're talking about what happens 6, 8, 10, 12 weeks earlier, and
Mhm.
what's going on in that usually young woman's life or in her world and the relationships. And to back up to at least include backing up the conversation and looking at what happens earlier in the process, in the life, in the sequence of events.
Absolutely. And even 6, 10, 12 years, right? Earlier, not just months or weeks, because we're
Yes.
looking at children that were abandoned by parents. We're looking at children that have been sexually abused that are now showing up as 17, 18, 23-year-old women and men. But there's so much junk inside that it's hard to understand, just like it was for me, what it is that's actually playing out here in these relationships. And if my love and my validation and my identity is wrapped in what this man thinks about me or vice versa, I'm willing to go to all ends of the earth for that. And that leads to a beautiful next step in talking about the abortion decision. Oftentimes anymore, it is not a matter of science. Is this really a baby? Is this not really a baby? It is a matter of, I'm looking at myself and my circumstances, and I don't have self-esteem, self-worth, or value. I don't believe that I can do this, or I'm so wrapped up in a relationship that I don't want to lose the one thing that is giving me that validation, love, and acceptance. And so we often hear things like, I can't do this, or I'm the only one that ever made it to college. I can't disappoint my parents. My husband will leave me if he finds out. And so it's not what maybe some of your listeners consider as, they don't believe it's a baby. It's not at all that conversation anymore. It's very
Wow.
much the other way.
Wow. Um, and with that being what the decisions are made around, stuffing more facts into the left brains of these people, that's not likely to change any of their internal process, because it's not a factual thing, as far as, if we want to say, science that is leading to the behaviors, including abortion, not limited to that. But these are very human and personal responses to hard things, rather than rational decisions on facts.
Oh, and I love that you said that, because left brain is linear, right? We
Yep.
do this, we do this, we do this. Right brain is where we store all of our trauma, where our creativity comes from, where our curiosity, and oftentimes the place that fogs everything away, right? And so as I process this with folks, the biggest thing that we can do to really heal this abortion wound in our culture is two things. We can start healing ourselves, right? The generational connection. Oftentimes it's grandma, mom, and then daughter. And it's not that we're not telling them to have abortions, or we are telling them to have abortions, but if it's the things that aren't being said, or the things that are being said in a different way. If you find yourself pregnant, I don't know what we're going to do with you, right? Or remember what happens when you have sex. There's this kind of peripheral conversation that we hear oftentimes. It's very accepted in our culture. But what if we actually said, when you have sex, it leads to pregnancy, and let's talk about that conversation. Right? If you're going to choose to engage in these experiences, let's talk about the outcomes. Let's talk about the things that come as a result. And sometimes families are not ready for that because of their own woundedness.
Yeah.
And when we talk about abortion, we go, abortion, we're not having this conversation around our dinner tables, in our living rooms, in the car from soccer practice. People are very afraid of this word. It's been polarized in our culture. And so our children are learning what abortion means, either by their own experiences, their friends' experiences, YouTube, Snapchat, whatever it is. And so we're not having these very opportunistic conversations that could be right brain, right? That we enter into this more logical space, and it's dangerous because they're learning on their own what this means to them.
Wow. One of the things the organization you are now directing, Support After Abortion, and you've alluded to that, has done is gathered research and put that in formats that look at some of what happens after, because support after abortion, that's the focus of the day-to-day work, but just a bit maybe about what some of those results are. And as I looked through some of that, I was intrigued that the data backs up what you're saying. You've been talking on the very human level, and absolutely that's true. But it's not that that is unsupported. There is, research actually saying that what you are describing is real.
Yeah. And so let's talk about the impetus behind that research, so your listeners really understand. This wasn't pre-post clinical work. This wasn't your medical work. This was a consumer research study that we really wanted to examine what men and women who've experienced abortion are wanting to tell us, right? Nobody had ever done this before. And it was really based on the fact that we were perplexed that more men and women hadn't been reaching out for help. We have a lot of healing programs in our communities, and very few people, 10 at the pregnancy center I was working at, were reaching out per year for help. But we know that 1 million people every year for 50 years have been experiencing abortion. Where are they, right? And this isn't a conversation about whether abortion hurts people or not, but if you have that extreme numbers, where are the the people that are needing to talk about their experience. And so we wanted to better understand, is it really not an issue for our culture? Is this low number really supposed to be telling us something? Or is there another issue? Is it a marketing issue? Is it a product issue? What's going on? And so the research was very informative in that way. And like you said, it really supports what I'm sharing today. The research showed that 80% of those impacted by abortion didn't know there was even help for or support for after abortion care. That's a huge issue when we're looking at this number of people. 80% said, yeah, I didn't even know there was a thing, right? That's significant when you look, and a majority of the people that did say that there was support said that Planned Parenthood was supportive in the after abortion healing part of it. And the actuality is that Planned Parenthood offers abortion, but they don't have an abortion healing arm. Yeah. That's important for us to know, but because people associate Planned Parenthood with abortion, that's what people started to see, right? Yeah. We also learned that the majority of folks wanted an anonymous program initially. Okay, so if they were looking for help, they wanted some place that they could go that people wouldn't know who they were initially, that they didn't have to show their face, because there is such a stigma in our culture. A really big story that I like to share is that we had a woman who said, my husband's really important in our city. I can't go to a place that talks about abortion. That would just defame him, and it would bring about things that I don't want for his political career. So she would go to the next county over to get the services she needed. And so I think that's really important as we look at this topic, that because it is so polarized and not something that we've normalized for people in their experience, we have a huge issue on our hands. Another group of people, well, the same group of people, another number, said that the majority of the time they did not want to start with a faith-based message. That's a huge piece of this journey, because if abortion is so tied into the religious aspects, most of the time what we were finding, 95% of the time, is that the healing programs were religious in nature, had some sort of scriptural context, referral to God, these sort of things. But because of the polarization, because of the shame, because of the secrets that women and men have been carrying for years, the piece about entering into a faith-based opportunity right away was very scary for them. And so without any other alternatives, or very few alternatives, people weren't looking for help because it didn't match their needs. So the dilemma that we were experiencing on a very surface level, or a very local level, was happening nationally through the research. And I think that's important for everybody to hear, is that, there is help. There's lots of help. But we don't know that there is. And we're learning that our people that have experienced abortion want a different type of healing program to start out with.
Yeah. As you describe that, there's some things that just well up in me. One is, why would the people who feel like they need help after abortion, support after abortion, not want a faith-based or religious-based program to start? One of the first things that comes to my mind is shame. So if we, as the body of Christ, and you and I are both followers of Jesus, we've talked about that for a moment off air before we hit record. If we in the body of Christ have put out there into the world a message that equates shame with abortion, or frankly, shame with all other kinds of unhealthy behaviors, if I can just use that euphemism, we're not seen as a place where help can be available. I love the idea that it doesn't have to start with Scripture and God. And at the same time, I also feel sadness there that is the perception of the body of Christ. And maybe not as your executive director hat for a minute, but as a follower of Jesus hat for a minute. How do you look at all of that?
Well, I look at it through the eyes of the women that have shared with me. I'm seeing a client right now who just experienced abortion, and her experience going in the clinic was very sterile, if you will. She didn't feel very connected, and she's had complications after her experience. 4 weeks later, she's still clotting. She's having, just bodily complications.
Yeah.
And she's very fatigued by the whole experience. And she just shared with me yesterday that she went back as a follow-up because this is abnormal to be bleeding as much as she is still. And again, felt very sterile in the response. Oh, you'll be okay. And she said she literally felt like they were pushing her out of the door. That's not uncommon to the experiences I have had with others that have shared, they tell me that it's going to be okay. Everything's going to be okay. This is just going to be a normal period. Right. But then they go out to the sidewalk, and this has been her experience as well. And she feels very threatened by the folks that are standing there. Even if there is a peaceful message being displayed, there's a cultural narrative that those people are protesters. They're holding signs of dead babies, these sort of things. And so there's this huge disparity where I can't go back to where I experienced abortion for support, but I can't go to this faith-based, cultural narrative group that is holding dead babies and shaming me. And so not only are we personally shaming ourselves, because like you said, or before we even started our conversation, no woman or man wakes up and says, I can't wait to terminate my pregnancy today. No woman wakes up and man wakes up with that. Like no man wakes up and says, I can't wait to hurt my wife today. Or woman says, I can't wait to cheat on my boyfriend of 2 years. Like we don't wake up with those intentions, right? It's the dysfunction in our life that informs those decisions. And so here we have, a personal, this is scary to me. It has not been discussed in my family. It's not being discussed. Maybe I've heard a preacher talk about it from a political perspective or a sin issue, right? So I have all these kind of inputs that are telling me that this is bad, I'm bad, right? We become that. But then we walk out and we experience this narrative from our culture, and it further pushes that thing that's causing that shame way deep inside of us. And so, separate from being an advocate in this space, it hurts my heart because as a follower of Jesus, I feel like where my relationship with God is the most important thing. And my relationship with God exudes me when I'm with people, and I don't have to force it down people's throat. In fact, working with sex trafficking survivors, we did that very carefully. We were very, very, very strategic about when we invited, because they had been so manipulated by so many people. And more times than not, women would say to me, you're different, Lisa. What's different about you? And that would invite a conversation, but it started with relationship. Good. And to think that we have 3 minutes of time with people on the sidewalk, or 3 minutes, and we're going to make an impact in our left brain, it's unrealistic.
Yeah. Wow. As you were describing that, I put myself in the place of that woman walking out of the clinic the second time she went back. Where does she get help? She tried to get help at the, Planned Parenthood or whatever the abortion clinic was, and the people holding signs, they are not a welcoming place. They are not feeling to her right brain like they're offering help. Where does she go? I just feel that heartache and maybe even desperateness in support after abortion. Talk a bit then about what does bring help, healing, support, whatever word is right for people who have been through this experience. Certainly women, but also men or other people close to those who have had this experience.
Well, it starts with our messaging, right? Support after abortion has become such a big name in this space because of what we name ourselves. And we've been criticized for that on Google ads and social media ads and these sort of things. But if we're not going to name it what it is, it's hard to treat something, as a doctor. Like we need a diagnosis to have a prescription, right? And so oftentimes, like, we've named things like, and I'm just making things up here, but the purple butterfly and the love yourself and all these things. And they're beautiful programs. I'm not trying to belittle those things, but we're hiding under a different kind of experience when this is what it is. Like we have people in our culture experiencing what they're calling abortion. We are providing support after. And so we've been very strategic about making sure people know that we're not trying to hide who we are or what we do. We're really saying, if you need support afterwards, here we are.
Yeah.
But we enter into this non-judgmental space informed by the research. So we offer a text line, we offer a phone conversation. You can join us on a web chat, you can join us on Facebook, Instant Messenger, WhatsApp. Those are really popular places. At first, when we started, we had tons of outreach from Africa, and it was like, whoa, what's going on? Women reaching out left and right. Um, we do a lot of awareness, conversations like we're having today, to just say, like, hey, if this is your story, or maybe you have found yourself on the judgmental side and didn't correlate the way in which you were talking with the people that you love and care about, consider something different. So we're doing both of those things. We're offering that non-judgmental, confidential, neutral space where we then let people direct their own healing. Traditionally it's been, okay, here's the 5 programs that match what you're looking for. Here's
Yeah.
the 1 program. No, we want to know what it is that you're looking for, because sometimes the abortion leads them to the phone call, but it's the relationship that's really hurting them, or it's the eating disorder, or it's whatever my parents are kicking me out of the house, whatever those things are. We want to meet them right where they are. And we know that over time, they'll find their healing in their journey. And so we ask them intentional questions. What are you looking for? What would help you most? Do you want an in-person? Do you want a faith message? And so we're really asking them to lead the ship in terms of what's next for them. And then we're encouraging, the people listening to start having these conversations in a new and different way, in a compassionate way. So those around us can hear our hearts and maybe perhaps share something about their abortion experience that they've never shared with anybody else.
Wow. That just has a lot of wisdom, just the tone, the weight there in how you describe that. It just feels wise. It feels attuned to how people really change. And your experience professionally as a therapist, you're an LCSW, and just so that therapeutic kind of perspective, I appreciate that, especially because for many of the people in my audience, the paradigm has been, okay, we're the church, we know, okay, the next step, we take you through these 5 steps, taking away agency from people, or at least you can feel like it is. And that has been done too much to them already. So much of what led them to where they are has been their agency has been disrupted or taken away, or they never learned that they could have agency. And just the whole paradigm of letting them see what next steps are available and giving them the agency and taking those steps for themselves. I appreciate that. I like that.
Yeah. And how important it is when we know that 1 in 4 of those we love and care about before their 45th birthday will experience abortion.
Yeah.
And that statistic, Dr. Carol, does not discriminate. It's everywhere. It's in the church, right? It's in our families, it's in our workplaces, it's in our communities. And so as we ask people what they're looking for and we show up differently, can you imagine what could change as a pastor speaks about all the hardships that people face, and he includes abortion in that conversation, right? Or that small group leader says, you know what, I just learned about this topic and I want to invite it to our conversation today. I learned that abortion hurts people. We have 12 people in this group. 3 of you statistically will have experienced abortion. Like, I want to offer this as an opportunity. Celebrate Recovery, 12-step programs, therapeutic offices. Like, our entire conversation would change about this topic if we started to see people, like you said, and we stopped forcing these things and we started offering them a loving response. It would change everything.
Well, let's change everything together. For people who may be interested, how can they find you? Where would they go, and the material you have available?
Absolutely. Supportafterabortion.com is the best place. The research is available. If you're looking for help, if you're interested in volunteering, all that is accessible on the website.
If you're listening, that's in the show notes. If you're watching, the link is under this video. Lisa, this has been such a rich conversation. Thank you so much, and many blessings to you and the work God has given you to do.
You too. Thank you so much for having me.
I am certain that something in that conversation helped you understand something more of the roots in your own soul about whatever may have been going on with you. Whether or not it's abortion, it may be 1 in 4 of you, as Lisa said, have had this experience. What about the roots in your own soul? Have you dealt with that? Have you found the healing and support you need? Or whether it's one of the other multiple manifestations of just the absolute need for connection. And then I believe it also tweaked your desire to help others. You know, God never takes us through anything just for our own selves. It's always for the benefit of others in some way. So, what has your own experience with wrestling with that root in your own soul? How has that played out in what God has built into you to help others? Understanding the roots in this way, I know, can also help you in being more effective in how God gives you to speak and help others. Do check the links under this video. Support After Abortion is there. You'll also find the link to a couple of our articles at drcarolministries.com about the need for intimacy that God built within us and how that gets messed up, intimacy gone wrong in all kinds of ways. I would love you to get those articles regularly, and when you check out one of those articles, there'll be a place where you can subscribe to get them weekly. I would ask you to do that. I would also ask you to subscribe to our YouTube channel here so that you can get our material here regularly. Thank you so much for being with me on this program. And until next time, may God bless you.